What happens when one of the most polarizing figures in modern royalty sits down with one of Britain's most beloved television hosts, and everything goes spectacularly wrong? The tension was palpable from the moment Meghan Markle walked onto the This Morning set. Her smile just a bit too tight, her posture just a bit too rigid. Allison Hammond, ever the professional, greeted her with that trademark warmth. But even she couldn't have predicted what was about to unfold. This wasn't just an awkward interview. This was a full-blown clash that ended with security being called and a guest being escorted off-set. Before we get into exactly what was said that caused everything to explode, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on in this whole situation. Trust me, you're going to want to weigh in after you hear what actually went down. The interview started innocently enough. Allison, wearing a vibrant yellow dress that seemed to brighten the entire studio, welcomed Meghan with open arms, literally going in for a hug that Meghan returned, but with a stiffness that viewers immediately picked up on in the live comments. The sofa, that famous This Morning sofa where countless celebrities had sat and shared their stories, suddenly felt like it had shrunk. Meghan settled into her seat, adjusting her cream-colored blazer and crossing her legs in that calculated way she'd perfected over years of public appearances. "It is so lovely to have you here," Allison began, her Birmingham accent warm and genuine as always. "Now, you've been through quite a journey these past few years. I think everyone watching wants to know, how are you really doing?" Meghan's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm doing well, Allison. Thank you for asking. It's been a process, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's been a lot of noise, a lot of opinions, but I'm focused on my family and the work that matters to us." "The work?" "Yes," Allison nodded, leaning forward with interest. "You've been involved in several projects. But I have to say, and I hope you don't mind me being honest here because that's what we do on this show, some people have questioned whether the focus has shifted a bit. You know, from the charitable work to the media presence. What would you say to those critics?" There it was, the first crack. Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but the cameras caught it. Viewers caught it. "I think that's an interesting perspective, Allison, but I would challenge the premise of that question. Everything we do, every interview, every project, it all comes back to the causes we care about. If we're not visible, if we're not using our platform, then what's the point?" Right, Allison said, but there was something in her tone that suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "But see, that's the thing that confuses people, isn't it? Because you left the royal family citing privacy concerns, wanting to protect your family from the media scrutiny. But then there were the interviews, the documentaries, the podcasts. It feels a bit, well, contradictory to some folks. Can you help us understand that?" Meghan's smile had completely vanished now. "With all due respect, Allison, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about what we were asking for. We never asked for total privacy. We asked for fair treatment. We asked not to be subjected to racist abuse and tabloid lies. There's a difference between controlling your own narrative and being torn apart by a media that has an agenda." "An agenda?" Allison repeated, her eyebrows raised. "That's quite an accusation. Do you think this show has an agenda?" "I think the British media as a whole has shown its colors," Meghan shot back, her voice rising slightly, "and I think that's been well documented. I'm not here to single out this program specifically. But let's not pretend that there hasn't been a certain tone in how I've been covered versus how others in similar positions have been covered." Allison sat back, crossing her arms, something she rarely did in interviews. The body language experts who would later dissect this moment would point to this as the turning point. "Meghan, I'm going to be straight with you because I think you deserve honesty. I've interviewed a lot of people on this sofa, royals, celebrities, politicians, regular people with extraordinary stories. And one thing I've learned is that people respect authenticity. They respect when someone owns their mistakes and doesn't always play the victim. Do you think there's any validity to the criticism that you've received? Any of it at all?" The studio went silent. Even the crew, who had seen countless interviews over the years, seemed to freeze. Meghan's face flushed slightly, and when she spoke, her voice had an edge that hadn't been there before. "Play the victim. Is that what you think I've been doing, Allison? You have no idea what it's like to be on the receiving end of what I've experienced. The death threats, the racist articles, the constant invasion of privacy, the lies about my family. And you're sitting here asking me if I've ever made a mistake? As if that somehow justifies any of it. I'm not justifying anything, Allison said firmly, her own voice taking on a more serious tone. But I am asking you to reflect, because from where a lot of people are sitting, and I'm including myself in this, it sometimes feels like there's no accountability. Everything is always someone else's fault. The palace, the media, the public, who dare to have opinions. At what point do you look inward? Accountability. Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about how the British press hounded my family. Let's talk about how they compared my child to a chimpanzee. Let's talk about how they criticized everything, from how I held my baby bump to what I wore to events. Let's talk about how they protected other members of the royal family while throwing me to the wolves. Where's the accountability there, Allison? And those things were wrong, Allison acknowledged, her voice softening slightly. Nobody is denying that. The racist coverage was disgusting and inexcusable. But that doesn't mean you get a free pass on everything else. You made choices to... You and Harry decided to do that interview. You decided to release that documentary. You decided to write that book. Those weren't decisions forced on you. Those were choices that had consequences. Consequences, Meghan repeated bitterly. You mean like being called divisive and manipulative? Like being accused of breaking up a family when I was the one who was pushed out? Like having every single thing I say twisted and used against me? Allison leaned forward again, her expression serious but not unkind. Meghan, I'm going to say something now that might be hard to hear, but I think it needs to be said. When you joined the royal family, people were excited. They really were. You represented something new, something modern, but somewhere along the way, it went wrong. And I know you have your version of events, and maybe that's the whole truth. Maybe it's part of the truth. But what I'm struggling with, and what a lot of viewers are struggling with, is this constant narrative that you're always the wronged party, always the one who's been treated unfairly, never the one who might have misjudged a situation or handled something poorly. Meghan stood up abruptly. The sudden movement caused Allison to stop mid-sentence, her eyes widening in surprise. You know what, Allison? I came here thinking this would be a respectful conversation. I came here thinking that maybe, just maybe, I'd be treated fairly for once. But this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly the problem. Sit down, Meghan, Allison said, her voice calm but firm. We're not finished. Oh, I think we are, Meghan replied, her voice shaking with barely controlled anger. This is ambush journalism. This is exactly the kind of thing I was warned about. You invite me here under the pretense of a friendly chat, and then you attack me. You question my integrity. You suggest I'm lying or exaggerating or playing victim. Well, I'm done. I'm not going to sit here and be disrespected like this. Allison remained seated, looking up at Meghan with an expression that was hard to read. This isn't an ambush, Meghan. This is journalism. This is what happens when you agree to an interview. You get asked questions, sometimes uncomfortable ones. If you only want to do interviews where people lob you softballs and tell you how wonderful you are, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all. How dare you, Meghan hissed, her composure completely gone now. You have no right to speak to me like that. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have every right, Allison shot back, standing up now too, the two women facing each other across the coffee table. This is my show, this is my country, and you came here voluntarily. If you can't handle being questioned, if you can't handle someone respectfully pushing back on your narrative, then that says more about you than it does about me. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Producers were frantically talking into their headsets, trying to decide whether to cut to commercial. Camera operators weren't sure where to point their lenses. This had gone far beyond a typical heated interview moment. This was personal now. Your country, Meghan repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Yes, this country that's been so welcoming to me. This country whose media drove me out. This country that couldn't handle having someone who looked like me in the royal family. Don't you dare, Allison said, her voice rising for the first time. Don't you dare make this about race when it's not. Meghan took a step back, her hand gripping the arm of the sofa. I cannot believe what I'm hearing right now. You're actually sitting here, on national television, lecturing me about racism, lecturing me about what is and isn't racist. You have absolutely no right. I have every right to my opinion, Allison said, her voice firm but not aggressive. Just like you have every right to yours. But see, that's the problem, isn't it? You want to be able to say whatever you want, make whatever claims you want, tell whatever story you want. But the moment someone questions it, the moment someone asks for clarification or pushes back even a little bit, suddenly they're the enemy. Suddenly they're part of the problem. Because you are part of the problem, Meghan snapped. You're sitting here on this platform with all this influence, and you're using it to undermine someone who's already been through hell. Do you have any idea what it's like to have the entire world watching your every move, judging your every decision, twisting your every word? Do you have any idea what it's like to fear for your safety, for your children's safety, because of the hatred that's been stirred up against you? Allison's expression softened slightly, but her voice remained steady. No, Meghan, I don't know exactly what that's like. I'm not going to pretend I do, but I do know what it's like to be judged. I do know what it's like to be criticized. I do know what it's like to be a black woman in British media, working my way up in an industry that wasn't always welcoming, and I've faced my share of racism and discrimination. But I've also learned that you can't go through life assuming everyone who disagrees with you is doing it from a place of malice or prejudice. This is unbelievable, Meghan said, shaking her head. You're actually comparing your experience to mine. You're actually suggesting that what you've been through is somehow equivalent to what I've faced. I'm not comparing anything, Allison replied, her patience clearly wearing thin. I'm simply saying that difficulty and criticism are part of life, especially public life. And yes, what you went through with the racist coverage was deplorable. But you also made choices that invited scrutiny. You also said things in interviews that people questioned. You also behaved in ways that rubbed people the wrong way. And that's not racism, Meghan. That's just people having opinions about public figures. Meghan's laugh was harsh and bitter. Rubbed people the wrong way. That's rich. You mean I didn't know my place? I didn't stay quiet and smile and wave. I didn't follow all the arbitrary rules of an institution that's rooted in colonialism and oppression. Now you're just being dramatic, Allison said. And there was a hint of frustration in her voice now. The royal family has its issues. Nobody's denying that. But you knew what you were getting into. You dated Harry for years before you got married. You knew what the institution was. You knew what would be expected. And yet you acted surprised when things were difficult, when there were protocols to follow, when you couldn't just do whatever you wanted. I acted surprised. Meghan's voice was rising again. I acted surprised that I would be subjected to racist abuse. I acted surprised that I would be hung out to dry by the institution while they protected Andrew. I acted surprised that my mental health would deteriorate to the point where I had suicidal thoughts and nobody would help me. Yes, Allison, I suppose I did act surprised by all of that. Forgive me for thinking that the royal family might actually care about my well-being. Allison paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter but no less firm. The stuff about your mental health, about feeling suicidal, that's serious. Nobody should minimize that. And if you genuinely asked for help and were denied, that's terrible. But Meghan, you told that story in an interview that was watched by millions of people around the world. An interview where you made a lot of claims that couldn't be verified. An interview where you spoke about private family conversations. An interview that you had to know would cause immense damage. So if you were really in such a dark place, if you were really that vulnerable, why agree to that interview? Why put yourself through that? Because I needed people to know the truth, Meghan said, her voice breaking slightly. Because I was tired of the lies. Because I was tired of being silenced. Because I needed to take back some control over my own story. Or because there was a lucrative deal involved, Allison said quietly, and the words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Let's be honest, Meghan. That interview wasn't just about truth-telling. It was also about money, about publicity, about maintaining relevance. And that's fine. That's your choice. But don't act like it was purely some noble act of speaking your truth. It was also a business decision. Meghan's eyes flashed with anger. How dare you? How dare you reduce my pain, my suffering, to a business decision? You have absolutely no idea what led to that interview. You have no idea what I was going through. Then tell me, Allison challenged. Tell me what I'm missing. Because from where I'm sitting, you had options. You could have left the royal family quietly. You could have moved to America, started your life over, focused on your family and your privacy like you claimed you wanted. But instead, you did the interview. You did the documentary. Harry wrote the book. You kept the titles. You kept trading on the royal connection, while simultaneously trashing the institution. So help me understand, Meghan. Help me understand how that's not having your cake and eating it too. You want to know why? Meghan's voice was trembling now, whether from anger or emotion or both. Because they wouldn't let us just leave. Because even after we stepped back, the attacks continued. The lies continued. They were willing to let us be destroyed in the press to protect other people. They leaked stories about us. They briefed against us. They turned us into villains, while they protected people who'd done far worse things. So yes, we told our side. Yes, we defended ourselves. What were we supposed to do? Just sit there and take it? You could have risen above it, Allison said simply. You could have lived your life, done your work, and let your actions speak for themselves. Instead, you kept engaging, kept responding, kept feeding the cycle. And every time you do another interview, every time you make another statement, you're ensuring that this story never ends. You're ensuring that you'll always be defined by your relationship with the royal family rather than anything you do independently. Meghan stared at Allison for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was cold. You know what I think, Allison? I think you've bought into the same narrative that everyone else has. I think you've decided that I'm the problem, that I'm the one who needs to change, that I'm the one who's being unreasonable. And I think that's because it's easier for you to blame me than to confront the real issues with this country and its institutions. And I think, Allison countered, that you've convinced yourself that everyone who doesn't agree with you is against you, that everyone who questions your version of events is part of some conspiracy, that you're always right and everyone else is always wrong. And that's not healthy, Meghan. That's not productive. That's not going to lead to any kind of peace or resolution. I don't need a lecture from you about what's healthy, Meghan shot back. I don't need your advice or your wisdom or your perspective. I came here as a courtesy, thinking that maybe we could have an actual conversation. But this has been nothing but an attack from the beginning. It hasn't been an attack, Allison insisted, her voice rising again. It's been a conversation, a real conversation, where someone actually challenges you, instead of just nodding along and agreeing with everything you say. And if you can't tell the difference, if you think that anyone who doesn't validate every single thing you say is attacking you, then maybe you need to take a step back and really think about that. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the sofa, her hands shaking. I'm done here. This interview is over. You can't just leave, Allison said, though she made no move to stop her. We're live on air. We have a full segment planned. Watch me, Meghan replied, already turning toward the exit. But Allison's next words stopped her in her tracks. This is exactly what people are talking about, Meghan. This right here. The moment things get difficult, the moment you're challenged, you run. You walked away from the royal family, you walked away from your family, you walked away from friends, and now you're walking away from this interview. At some point, you have to stop running and actually face things. Meghan turned back slowly, her face a mask of barely controlled fury. You want to talk about running? Let's talk about how I was driven out. Let's talk about how staying would have killed me. Let's talk about how I had to choose between my mental health and an institution that saw me as expendable. That's not running, Allison. That's survival. Or it's quitting, Allison said, and her voice was quieter now, but somehow more cutting. Maybe it's quitting when things got hard. Maybe it's not being willing to put in the work to navigate the difficulties, to compromise and adapt. Maybe it's wanting all the benefits of being royal without any of the responsibilities or restrictions. Quitting, Meghan repeated, and she laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any warmth. You think I quit? You think I just gave up because things were a bit difficult? You have absolutely no comprehension of what I went through. None. You don't know anything about me, Meghan said, her voice low and intense. You sit there with your judgments and your opinions and you think you have me all figured out. But you don't. You don't know what it cost me to speak up. You don't know what I sacrificed. You don't know what I've lost. Then enlighten me, Allison said, crossing her arms, because all I've seen is someone who left one incredibly privileged life for another incredibly privileged life. All while complaining about how hard everything is. You live in a mansion in California, Meghan. You have security, you have money, you have opportunities that most people could only dream of. And yet you're still presenting yourself as this perpetual victim who can't catch a break. Privilege doesn't protect you from racism, Meghan shot back. Privilege doesn't protect you from having lies told about you in the press. Privilege doesn't protect you from being betrayed by people you thought you could trust. And the fact that you keep bringing up my privilege, as if that somehow negates everything else, shows exactly how shallow your understanding of this situation really is. Allison's eyes narrowed. My understanding isn't shallow, Meghan. My understanding is based on watching you for years now, watching how you operate, watching how every single thing becomes about you and your suffering. And I'm sorry, but at some point, people stop sympathizing. At some point, people start wondering if maybe, just maybe, you're not entirely blameless in all of this. Not entirely blameless, Meghan repeated slowly. So, you do think I'm to blame? You do think I deserve what happened to me? That's not what I said, Allison replied, her frustration evident. Stop twisting my words. I'm saying that in any conflict, any situation, there's usually fault on multiple sides. I'm saying that while, yes, you were treated badly in many ways, you also made decisions that contributed to the situation. That's not the same as saying you deserved the racist abuse or the harassment, but it is saying that you're not a passive character in your own story. Meghan's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. Every word out of your mouth is just proving my point. This is exactly what I've been dealing with for years. This constant picking apart of everything I do, every choice I make, every word I say. And when I defend myself, I'm told I'm being difficult or playing victim or not taking responsibility. It's a game I can't win, Allison, and you're sitting here playing it just like everyone else. Or maybe, Allison said, leaning forward slightly, maybe you're the one playing games. Maybe you're the one who's learned that playing the victim card gets you sympathy and attention and keeps you relevant. Maybe you're the one who's realized that as long as you can point to the royal family or the British press or whoever else as the villain, you never have to actually look at your own behavior. My own behavior? Meghan said, her voice rising to a near shout now. What exactly about my behavior needs examining, Allison? The fact that I married someone I loved, the fact that I tried to do my job despite impossible circumstances, the fact that I chose my mental health and my family over an institution that was destroying me? Which part of that is so problematic? The part where you act like you're the only person who's ever struggled? Allison fired back, her own voice rising to match Meghan's. The part where you act like the rules shouldn't apply to you, the part where you demand privacy while simultaneously doing tell-all interviews, the part where you criticize the institution while still using your titles and your connection to it. The part where you've spent years now making millions off of talking about how terrible your experience was. That's the part that people have a problem with. Meghan, I have earned every penny I've made. I have worked for everything I have. And if people want to pay me to tell my story, to hear my truth, that's not exploitation. That's me finally having control over my own narrative after years of having it controlled by others. Your truth, Allison said, and there was something almost sad in her voice now. That's the phrase you keep using. Your truth. As if truth is subjective. As if there aren't facts and reality that exist outside of your perception. And maybe that's the real issue here. Maybe you've convinced yourself so thoroughly of your own version of events that you genuinely can't see any other perspective. There is no other perspective, Meghan insisted. There's what happened, and there's the lies that have been told about what happened. And I've spent years trying to correct those lies, trying to set the record straight. And for what? So people like you can sit here and tell me I'm the problem. You're not the only problem, Allison clarified, her voice firm. But you are a problem. Because instead of moving forward, instead of building something new and meaningful with your life, you're stuck in this endless cycle of grievance and complaint. And it's boring, Meghan. It's exhausting. And it's making people who initially supported you, people who initially sympathized with you, turn away. Meghan's face had gone pale again, but her eyes were blazing. You think I care about people turning away? You think I care about maintaining some kind of popularity contest? I care about the truth. I care about my family. I care about making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other people. Then do something about it, Allison challenged. Actually do the work. Stop talking and start doing. Use your platform for something other than relitigating the past. Show people who you are beyond your relationship with the royal family. Because right now, Meghan, that's all you are. You're the woman who married into the royal family and then left. That's your entire identity in the public consciousness. And whose fault is that? It's the media's fault, Meghan shot back immediately. It's the press that won't let it go. It's the tabloids that keep writing stories. It's people like you who keep bringing it up in interviews. Allison threw her hands up in exasperation. You came on this show, Meghan? You agreed to this interview. If you wanted to be known for something else, you could have declined. But you didn't, because you need this. You need the attention. You need the platform. You need to keep the story alive. I don't need anything from you or anyone else. I'm here as a favor, trying to engage with the British public one more time, trying to extend an olive branch. And this is what I get. An olive branch, Allison repeated incredulously. You coming here to grace us with your presence. That's not an olive branch, Meghan. That's arrogance. How dare you, Meghan breathed, taking another step forward. The security personnel who'd been standing off to the side moved slightly closer. How dare you speak to me this way? I have tried so hard to be respectful, to be patient, to explain my side of things. And all you've done is attack me, belittle me, dismiss everything I've been through. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm not ashamed, Allison said, standing her ground. I'm doing my job. I'm asking the questions that need to be asked. And if you can't handle that, if you can't handle being treated like every other public figure who comes on this show and gets questioned, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Maybe I shouldn't, Meghan agreed, her voice shaking. Maybe I should just disappear completely. Maybe that's what everyone wants anyway. Nobody wants you to disappear, Allison said, her voice softening slightly. What people want is for you to be real, to be honest, to admit when you're wrong, to show some humility, to stop acting like the world owes you something just because you've suffered. Most people, Meghan said bitterly, haven't been through what I've been through. Most people haven't had their lives destroyed by an institution and a media machine that's designed to protect itself at all costs. And most people, Allison countered, haven't had the opportunities you've had either. So yes, you've been through difficult things, but you've also been given extraordinary things. And maybe it's time to focus on gratitude instead of grievance. Meghan stared at Allison for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but filled with venom. You have no idea what you're talking about. No idea at all. And I'm done trying to explain it to someone who's clearly made up their mind about me. I've made up my mind, Allison said, based on your own words and actions. You talk about privacy, but you court publicity. You talk about moving forward, but you're constantly looking backward. You talk about family, but you've estranged yourself from most of yours. My family abandoned me, Meghan said, and now there were tears in her eyes. They chose that institution over me. So don't you dare lecture me about family. Your father's given interviews saying he's tried to reach out, Allison pointed out quietly. He's said he wants a relationship with his grandchildren. Is that true? So there you have it, one of the most explosive interviews in recent memory. Was Allison out of line with her questioning, or was she simply doing her job? Was Meghan justified in her anger, or did she overreact to legitimate criticism? Make sure you subscribe to the channel and drop a comment below with your honest thoughts. Do you think Meghan should have walked out, or should she have stayed and defended her positions? Let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe.